This is part 14 in the Creed 7B Teleprinter restoration series. I've turned my attention to the carriage. I've gone as far as I can with the main base unit until I fit the carriage to it. So I need to get this unit sorted out. As you can see, I've started by stripping it down. I've got a few more parts to take off. I won't be dismantling it 100%, but I'll be taking it apart as far as I need to be able to access and clean and lubricate all the moving parts and bearings. I've had a good look at this, and there are a few parts I do need to do some work on. For a start, I will need to repaint the paper guide. It's not in terrible state, but it is starting to rust, and so I thought I might as well strip that and get it repainted. And while I'm doing that, I will also be repainting the end cheeks. So these are the supports for the main rail. It looks like they've been repainted at some point, but only in part, so I'll strip these down and repaint them. I'll also repaint the knob. That's getting fairly scuffed. The rest of it is just really a case of cleaning up, getting all the corrosion and grime off it. The shaft needs to be taken out and polished. I've already started cleaning some parts, clean and repack the bearings, and then, as I say, just making sure all the rest of it is in fairly good order. This actually appears to be cardboard, so I'm not quite sure what to do with that just yet. I'll have a look at it and see what the best options are for cleaning that up. This has the tractor feed option fitted. Apparently it comes in several variants. You can have tractor feed or friction feed. It doesn't look very big, but it's actually the exact same width as A4 paper, so I'm hoping that standard A4 tractor feed paper will fit. If not, I'll be on the lookout for some paper specifically for this machine. So hopefully this won't take too long to get sorted out. I can then fit it to the base unit, and I can then start further investigating any adjustments that need doing. I can do that before I've restored the keyboard. I'll explain how the keyboard works in the future video, but for now I need to get this unit sorted so that I can proceed. So I'll go and get some of this cleaned up, get the parts repainted, and then get back on camera and show the progress. I'm working my way through the various parts on the carriage, and there's far more dismantling required than I'd first anticipated. A lot of the bearing pieces are completely seized up, especially in the paper handling part of the carriage. A lot of the levers and pivots are stuck, and while I could probably free them up just by working them back and forth with some lubrication, I've decided that on the whole the easiest thing to do is to just dismantle them. It will give me the opportunity to clean them as well. They're pretty much all cadmium plated, so they do polish up quite nicely. I won't be doing this to all the parts, but I will give all the various bits on the carriage a good clean, and then reassemble it, adjust them and lubricate each part, and hopefully get them all freed up. Okay, so that's the carriage ready to go back on. I stripped it down, cleaned all the bearings, cleaned out all the oil points. I completely dismantled the slide and the actual carriage itself. Cleaned it up a little bit. I don't want to go too mad with the cleaning. I want it to still look like it's an old machine. But I did repaint some parts. I left the main part of the carriage as it was, but I did paint the end cheeks. They were in quite bad condition. And I also painted the paper feed chute because that was getting quite rusty. So I wanted it to look fairly reasonable, so I gave that a fresh coat of paint. I've adjusted it as best I can with it not on the machine. All the parts seem to work as they should. The only tricky part of the adjustment was the tension on the carriage return spring, and I think I've got that right. This also controls the point at which the bell rings to let you know you're getting close to the end of the carriage. Also painted the knob. That was getting quite or had been quite beaten up, so we've got the paper guide and the paper knife. Obviously the paper pressure guide needed a little bit of adjustment. Although I have started cleaning up the other parts, I'm not going to refit these at the moment. This is the equivalent of a paper tray. So the machine was quite nicely designed in that you could swap the carriage out in just probably less than a minute. And I will show refitting it in a couple of minutes. But it supported different paper types. You can either have plain sheets, rolls of paper, or in this case there was a perforated tractor drive type attachment that you could have. And this was really for when you needed precision printing for forms and that sort of thing. The paper that they originally supplied came in kind of packs about an inch thick. I think it was 200 sheets. And they sat in this paper tray, and then they were fed through the machine, and it printed generally a page at a time. I'll be using it initially, at least for testing, in kind of single sheet mode, so I'm not going to bother refitting the paper feed tray at this time. It will just get in the way, make the machine a bit more difficult to handle. I may well fit that later on, but for now I'll just use it in this mode. So now I'll get it refitted to the machine. I'll run the machine up and make sure that the paper feed is working and that the return and the carriage return, etc. works. From that point on, I can fit a ribbon and then find a way to send the printer some data, and we should be able to see if it's capable of printing. Okay, ready to refit the carriage. It fits onto a pin at the rear left, and the whole carriage can be swung in and out for easy maintenance and paper loading, that sort of thing. It's quite a nice arrangement. It's a good design in that you can swap the carriage type in probably less than a minute. It allows you to swap for different paper types, whether you want to use plain sheets or tractor feed paper. It's easy to swap the carriage to suit either one. I'm going to, as I say, just fit the bare carriage at the moment and use it in single sheet mode, just to make it easier to test. So to fit, it just sits on the pin. And then there's a stop and a guide at the right hand side that prevents it going out too far, but if you raise it you can push it further back. And then you simply swing the carriage forward. It locks into place, all the levers engage, and in theory at least it should now be ready to start working. I'll try turning it by hand before I apply power. I don't want to tempt fate by just running the motor up until I've run it through a manual cycle. If it does come to a sudden stop because there's something wrong with the carriage, then as I said earlier, it can do a lot of damage to the machine. So it's just printed the character. Okay, so I have the carriage fitted. I have a piece of plain paper. It's not perforated paper. I've got some on order, but for now this will do for some very basic testing. I've refitted the original ribbon, which is obviously pretty much dried out, but should still give us some impression if the printer's working at all. And what I'll do now is power it up and see if we can get any indication on the paper that it's capable of printing. Now, one thing with this, you'll notice that on the drum there are a lot of these print pins that are blanks. They don't go all the way to the end, there's no character on them, and they represent characters that are not supported by the printer. At the moment I can't feed any data into it. That's the next step really, is to create a mechanism by which I can send in actual data. So at the moment I'm just manually moving the solenoid, and that's giving random characters. If we happen to stop on a non-supported character, then although it will go through the actions of printing, it won't actually print anything because of course this doesn't reach the paper, but also it won't advance the carriage because it's a non-supported character, so effectively it's a non-print. It just saves putting garbage all over the paper like modern printers would. So I'll power it up and see if we can get anything on the paper at all. The tape lifter isn't working properly. I'm not sure if this is the right one for this particular carriage type. It's way too close to the paper, so I'll need to modify that before it will work properly. But even so, we should still see something on the paper if the printer mechanism is working at all. So I'll start it up. It's obviously quite noisy, so hopefully we'll see something. Okay, well, we've got a couple of valid characters there. That's the times when the carriage moved. This is supposed to go down on its own, but of course it isn't. I'll just pull the paper forward, and as you can see, we are actually getting characters on the paper. So I'll try a few more, see if we can get any more valid characters to print. Back down. So as you can see, we are getting some characters. I'll just zoom in so you can get a closer look. So hopefully you can see this. We are getting characters appearing on the paper. Not only that, considering how old the ribbon is, it's pretty much totally dried out. They're very clear, good quality printing, so it looks very promising. And not only that, we're getting single character impressions, so the hammer's only hitting one character at a time. Unfortunately, my camera can't do a high enough frame rate for me to be able to see what's actually going on while it's printing. I'm on the lookout for a higher speed camera, and if I can find one, I'll take some high speed footage of this. It will be very interesting to watch it in action. But what we're seeing on the paper clearly indicates that it's only hitting one character at a time. Which means that the print head is working as it should, the clutch is working as it should, and as long as we feed it a valid character, it seems to be printing it successfully. So in the next video I'll create a means by which I can send it valid data, and then we'll see if it's capable of printing the actual characters that it's being sent. Once that's up and running, then the next step will be the keyboard. But that's it for this video. All comments welcome.